There's also a huge political controversy, and that's our politics lead today. With 25 days until the election, the Republican running for governor is being accused of voter suppression by his Democratic opponent. Brian Kemp is not only the Republican gubernatorial nominee, he's Georgia's Secretary of State, and now civil rights groups are suing him, claiming that Kemp's office put more than 53,000 voter registrations on hold. An analysis by the Associated Press shows that nearly 70% of those voter registrations are those belonging to African Americans. This is all because of the exact match law, which is used here, and that means any typo or even a missing hyphen between the voter's ID and their voter registration can be flagged. Civil rights groups say that practice is discriminatory.
The reality is that minority voters are often the ones with unusual names that are sometimes harder for state officials to capture accurately in the state's database, and they are being penalized for that.
Brian Kemp's campaign calls the claims bogus. He says Georgia has increased voter rolls under his leadership. His Democratic opponent, Stacey Abrams, wants him to resign as Secretary of State ahead of the election next month. Let's talk about this. Simone, Brian Kemp doesn't dispute the racial makeup of these voters' registrations that are in question. He blames it on an organization called the New Georgia Project, which is a voting group founded by his opponent, Democrat Stacey Abrams, who registered mostly black voters. He says they submitted inadequate forms.
So that's not true. So there's a little history here. So one, Brian Kemp is currently the Secretary of State, and he was sued by the New Georgia Project in 2014 and 2016 for this very thing. This exact match law was at first a policy of none other than Brian Kemp's, that the Secretary of State's office did under the table without telling anyone. And the only reason anybody found out late in 2016 was because 50,000 voters that the New Georgia Project registered to vote were not on the rolls. So they reached a compromise with the Secretary of State's office. And while the compromise was reached, the Secretary of State's office went behind their back, went to the legislature, then the legislature passed a bill over the very policy that he had previously been sued over. So Brian Kemp knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't have the best interests of Georgia voters in mind, and I absolutely think he should resign.
Brian Kemp argues that this is bogus, that this is just being used by Abrams to gin up outrage to get voters to the polls. It is always weird, though, when a Secretary of State is running for higher office, and you might remember Chris Kobach running for governor, and he had a supervisory role there in looking at the recount between him and his Republican opponent. Do you think there's any merit to the charge that he should step down from this?
Or maybe you should delegate the actual, election day supervision to a career deputy or something like that. I mean, to be fair, the law was passed by the Georgia legislature. That's not exactly going under the table. That's like a public act. And you can vote. I mean, and this, they should be told this, the 53,000 people can show up, show their driver's
their ID, right, yeah.
Their ID. They can vote. It's a provisional ballot. And then people, and this happens all the time, provisional ballots get counted often. And if it is just a ridiculous hyphen missing, the ballot will be counted. So I have no view on whether, I don't know that the law is necessary or wise. But if I were a Democrat in Georgia, I would be telling those 53,000 people, you need to go and vote.
Yeah, well, and that's what the ACLU of Georgia is telling people. They're blasting, hey guys, please go out and vote, because media coverage that doesn't note this does discourage people from going out. And the ACLU has even asked the Secretary of State if it will be provisional or regular, and the Secretary of State's office says they will be regular ballots.
They won't be regular ballots. So they have told
ACLU
they won't be regular.
They
will, in fact, be provisional ballots. You cannot
get out there,
Secretary
people.
of State.
Yeah, but the important thing is that the Secretary of State.
I don't want to be part of discouraging them. So.
the Brian Kemp's office is saying you can vote even if you're on this list, even if it's been held up. It will be a provisional ballot.
But that's assuming that you can prove something, right? I mean, it's not, if they're saying something's wrong, if it's not an exact match, then you would have to provide something else.
No, it's an exact match. You vote, and then they
then what's the point of the law? That doesn't even make sense. Why would you have an
an
exact match law if you aren't asking people to match exactly?
Well, she's right. They are asking people to match exactly, and when it doesn't, and when what you have does not match at the polls, they will not allow you to vote. They will give you a provisional ballot. So I want to be clear.
They will give
pointing
provisional ballot.
But the provisional
Wait, I thought
ballots,
you
as
said
we
it would
all
be
know, are
not
not regular
provisional.
ballots, and they are not
Yeah.
counted the same way. So I just want to be clear. Pointing out voter suppression is not discouraging people to vote. It's holding the system accountable. And Brian Kemp is not being honest here on this thing.
I want to move on to one other thing, a couple other midterm stories. We're 25 days away from the midterms. Senator Ted Cruz's challenger, Democrat Beto O'Rourke, a congressman, just announced that his campaign raised $38 million in just the last 3 months. That's more than triple what Cruz raised at the same time, more than Jeb Bush raised for his campaign during the entire presidential campaign. That's a lot of money in a red state.
Yeah, maybe an expensive L.
Do you think he's going to lose no matter what?
No, I don't think he's going to lose no matter what. I think there has been hope at various parts of the cycle, due in part to the fact that people are enthusiastic about him. It remains Texas, and I do think polling has shown in various red states that the Kavanaugh fight galvanized people on the other side as well, and because Democrats were already extremely enthusiastic, that coming closer to parity did matter in those polls.
The latest Q poll has Cruz up 9 points over O'Rourke.
I mean, I think even pre-Kavanaugh, it was a very uphill climb for Beto, and I think he's fantastic, and I think he's a fantastic candidate, but his problem is he has a very enthusiastic support among white liberals. And when he gets out more with non-college educated white people, he doesn't do as well. And he's not doing as well as he needs to be doing with the Hispanic community. And that's probably his biggest problem.
So it's slightly different. I don't know. I talked to a Democratic pollster this morning. These polls are really hard in the mid-year.
Well, there's
what
that.
is the model
Yeah,
for turnout?
right.
It's not going to be the same as 2014 or 2010, which were Republican years. You know, it's not going to be the presidential turnout. Can Beto O'Rourke generate a presidential type turnout among minorities, among younger voters? That's what he would need in Texas to expand the election. Now, I guess I was in Texas for one day, so these anecdotes are worth they're worth what you're paying for them, Jake. But it is kind of amazing. It is feels a little Obama-like.
Yeah.
I was at the University of Texas campus to see the activity going on around Beto, so I don't rule out an upset.
Well, I was just going to say, Democrats in red states, starting with Alabama, have shown that they are turning enthusiasm into very competent get-out-the-vote efforts. So that is part of the calculus as well.
Although,
it's not just enthusiasm.
Although Kirsten points out, I think the latest poll had Ted Cruz getting 40% of the Latino vote in Texas. O'Rourke needs more than 60% of the Latino vote if he's going to win.
If he's going to win. Look, I think it's important to note what Bill said. There is no model for what we're going to see come November 6th. And so I think if he runs a good ground game, which he has been running, and it's not just Beto, there are other elections down ballot that are galvanizing folks. Texas is poised to send their first Latina congresswoman to the Congress this fall if folks get out the vote.